This is Preti Kaur, and you're listening to Millennials Boleh, the show which is all about millennials. Hi, listeners. Welcome to this week's episode of Millennials Boleh. Our topic for this week is Millennials Boleh have special interests. To discuss this topic, we have on the show Omar Bashir, who I have known since university. He is by far one of the most interesting people that I've met. And he is now currently living in Madrid and conducting a Community of Madrid auxiliary program. Hi, Omar, how are you?
I'm doing fine. It's nice to be on your show. And yeah, I hope to add some valuable input.
Hey, thank you, Omar. It's really nice to listen to you and also to see you. So we're actually filming this via Zoom. But yeah, it's really great to catch up with you after, I think it's 3 years that it's been since we've met each other and since we've actually been classmates. But yeah, I think we had lots of group projects where we worked with each other, and yeah, and I think those were some of the more interesting group projects that that we did, I guess.
Yeah, working in group projects was fun, and we did quite a lot of interesting things on the program. When we were doing education together, and yeah, it was enjoyable.
Yeah, it was, and it's really nice to catch up now as well. Now that we're, 3 years post uni, and you've been up to lots of things, and I guess I've been up to a few things as well. So it's quite nice to catch up now and to see how our opinions may have changed from that time. Right, and that actually leads us to the topic that we're discussing today, which is about special interests and how millennials sort of feel about a topic like that. So that's why we've got Omar today, and he's got lots of different interests from what I remember. I think you were, you had lots of things that you used to do apart from attending lessons. And I think I was kind of the opposite. I was just very much, attending lessons, and that was it. But yeah, so Omar, my first question for you is, do you have any special interests?
Well, I do have a lot of interests. I don't know whether it makes it special or not, but I try to dabble in a lot of different things and experience many things. And I feel that when you do different things, it opens your mind up to different solutions or different ways of thinking. So, for instance, being millennials, we got access to the internet at its very early stages, and we had like just the beginnings of Facebook and social media and everything like that. And with the internet, you got to see different cultures from around the world. And if you also consider it, even TV, international TV, like you'd see a lot of American programs. So a lot of people would know tons of stuff about America, even though they've never been to America. And so as millennials, I think that we got to get an exposure of almost a global level to a degree. And so when I look at my interests, they're quite varied. I do quite a few physical activities. I do quite a few things that aren't really within the culture I was brought up in. So for instance, I read anime and manga. And I've never been to Japan, but I've always having watched anime and having read manga, I've always wanted to go to Japan because I feel like there's a part of me that wants to see that and explore that and enjoys that. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I think I think the point that you mentioned about millennials sort of having more exposure and exposure towards, I think lots of different things. I think the general perception that society has is that we're more exposed to social media and sort of, we're sort of the digital age sort of population and things like that. But I think we've also been exposed to lots of international content as well. Like you said, I think we've got, like in Malaysia, for example, lots of our television comes from, Hollywood. So a lot of the sort of the input that we have when it comes to entertainment is very American-based entertainment. And I don't know, how was it for you? So you grew up in Saudi. So what kind of, exposure did you have to entertainment?
So I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and my mother is British and my father is Sudanese. So I got exposed to a lot of different cultures at the same time. And when we watched TV, it was mostly in, well, it was mostly in English, but there were also Arabic programs. Uh, and so a lot of it was also from America. So I got a lot of exposure from American programs. Occasionally we'd see British programs, which were very different in a sense, like humor-wise from American programs. And we also, living in Riyadh, went to different communities. So I got to experience how different cultures reacted to each other, what were the social norms in each culture. It's very different going to a Sudanese party as going to maybe a more British-based party or Western-based party. Uh,
Yeah.
so
And that's really interesting. And do you think that that has sort of, how has that shaped your interests? And I guess, yeah.
I think I'd like to think I'm more open-minded as an individual, and that having lived the life I've lived, like for example, going to Malaysia for university in a British university, it was a really interesting experience because I got to be with the international community. I got to experience Malaysia, and before that, I'd never imagined I would find myself in Malaysia or be able to be a part of the culture. But to a degree, I felt like part of me is now a bit Malaysian because I've spent like almost 5 years in Malaysia. I have friends there. I have a kind of foundation there, and I know that I can go back to Malaysia and feel quite at home. So the life I've lived has been a rather blessed one because I can kind of just go around and try different things. Um, I think some of the more interesting things I've tried have been drama at university, being a part of theatre production backstage and on stage. Although I wouldn't say I was the best actor. Uh, Never forget your lines.
No, of
Uh,
course not.
but it's great to improvise, great improvising practice. And another thing I've tried is archery, which was a fun activity that normally doesn't crop up in this modern age, but is actually quite a fun way to meditate and to try and just exercise. It's kind of fun. So yeah, I think that I just have a lot of interests, and that's what makes it probably special. I would say that I haven't really explored the social media part, where I think a lot of millennials and also I think Gen Z have more experience in. So I would say that's probably something that kind of makes me a bit different. Like I have a Facebook, but I don't really use it. The only thing I really use is WhatsApp. But social media is such an integral part of society now because you have Instagram, you have Snapchat, you have Facebook, and that's where you post all of your interests on to show the world of what you are doing. So, usually you'll find someone posting like, oh, I'm having the best time of my life. I'm traveling here and traveling there, or yes, I just helped out in this community. And so our generation is exposed to like seeing everyone doing things but not actually getting to experience that a bit.
Yeah.
uh, so
No, I really agree with that point actually. And I believe that with, with the digital age that we have in social media, I think um, a lot of the interests that, millennials have are sort of related to trend culture. So, what's the latest trend? And I think, currently it's TikTok and,
mm,
lots of like, Instagram has always been sort of one of the, for a few years now, I think it's been, in popular culture and in, one of the platforms that everyone needs to have. And as a millennial, I have one too. But I think, now we're shifting towards TikTok, and I think our interests as millennials, and I think, like you said, Gen Z as well, I think we are sort of shifting towards what's the latest trend, and we sort of adapt that to our interests. And I'm not, and my opinion is that, how, is that truly our special interest, or is that us trying to fit in to the culture that is sort of being exposed to us in a sense?
I think with millennials, you have multi-layered cultures. So you have the culture where you grow up in, the culture you want to identify with, and then like the internet culture where you're dealing with, you know, Snapchat, Instagram. It's quite interesting to see how millennials react to TikTok because I feel like a lot of people are not very positive about TikTok, but Gen Z has really taken onto the platform and they kind of enjoy it. It's their playground, and I think millennials are experiencing the opposite. Well, they're wearing the boot on. They're kind of on where boomers were,
Yeah.
like telling millennials, "Oh, like Facebook is bad, or oh, social media is terrible. Like you're gonna ruin your life." It's like millennials are like, "Ha, look at these people." And like, oh, Fortnite is a terrible game, and it's like, well, it's not exactly. It's more of it's just not you're not in the in crowd at the
Yeah.
moment. So
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that inferiority complex that comes in as well with generations that come before, and you know the generation that's sort of growing at present. And I do believe that. I think I definitely am to be blamed a little bit. I do think I have a perception of a TikTok because I live in a boarding school and I teach teenagers, and it's really it's interesting in a lot of ways to see how you know that you know moments of their day, you know, when they have time, that it's sort of spent around sort of planning for a TikTok video and you know sort of choreographing what they would do, and most of them are dance related. So but I think there's a lot of thinking that goes into that as well, how they plan and how they want to execute a content that would you know sort of gain views and that would gain sort of public applause, I guess, in a sense. And so it's quite interesting to see that shift as well from millennials to Gen Z, and how different things pop up and how that shapes our interests as well. Yeah,
I would say that yeah, to plan a TikTok video and to try and get it to a place where it attracts all the attention, especially now in such a very like with such a concentrated market, it's it's quite high skill level. And so it's like a few seconds. And we had these things like growing up, I think for some people, like not for me, but like we had Vine where it was a 6 second video and that was it. And so the thing is with TikTok, it's just that there's so much content and it comes on so fast, you only get like a moment. And whereas before, like the Harlem Shake, that kind of went on for a few months. That trend lasted longer.
yeah.
And so I think now with Gen Z, they have TikTok where it's a little bit faster in terms of turnover.
So would you say then that our attention span as millennials is perhaps a little bit longer, and that would obviously have a knock-on effect on our interests as well? Perhaps we would have interest for a longer time, and that might sort of evolve and change over time. Or would you say that you know our attention span is as short as Gen Z?
To be honest, attention span is always an interesting thing because I think it really is based on your environment and the things you've done in your life. So, for instance, if you've lived in a countryside, you haven't really had much access to the internet and you've been working on a farm, you got a different sort of attention span and you got a different eye for detail as compared to someone who was born in a city and on the internet like almost 12 hours a day. You're switching through things, you're kind of multitasking, you're trying to look here and then also entertain yourself in another way. So attention span is a difficult topic. I think Gen Z has a slightly different attention span from millennials, um, and because well, yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, no, I think you're right there, Omar. I think yeah, I guess in a way it could be a factor that that sort of influences that special interest, but at the same time, I think you know it might not be completely related as well. And I think you know that's a different that's a whole other discussion of its own. But yeah, it's interesting to sort of think about that factor as well. And since we were talking about special interests, I did some research on this topic, and I found a study was conducted on sort of millennials and sort of their general top five special interests. And number one is actually listening to music or playing an instrument. Number two is reading, and then fitness comes at number three, and then we've got gaming at number four, and cooking or baking at number five. So what I was thinking when I read, or when I sort of saw the findings of the study, was that I was quite surprised that contrary to popular belief, and I think you have a different opinion on this because you mentioned something earlier about Gen Z, but contrary to popular belief, the top three interests of the list doesn't actually involve computers or technology in any way, because we've got listening to music or playing it, reading, and fitness. But then obviously gaming comes at number four. So what are your opinions on that?
Well, I mean, listening to music, I feel most people listen to music on a device. So a lot of people in our generation have like Spotify, or they have their well, if you're really old, you have your MP3 player. Wow, that's something
digital
to think
dinosaur.
about.
Oh, you're
Yes.
turning into a digital dinosaur
An
for our age.
MP3 player is now an old thing, yes. Or you have your own, like, you know, music track that you have on your computer downloaded from YouTube, and it's all your favorite songs. So music-wise, I totally agree. Like almost everyone listens to music. It's everywhere. It's all around the world, and I think only a few places can you really kind of escape having access to such easy access to music. And as for playing instruments, yeah, quite a few people have taken up on that. Even I've tried to pick up guitar, although I wouldn't say I'm anywhere good yet. Still got to practice with that. And then what was number two?
Reading.
Reading. Again, yes, with the fortunate thing about being a millennial or Gen Z is that we've kind of been blessed in a sense that we have so much. But the problem with that is, like, we have access to books, we have access to Kindles, we have access to the internet, and there's so much information that I feel that sometimes we have a nice overview or some knowledge on it, but not like complete knowledge on a topic. So there's no mastery of a topic. It's more of picked up, looked a bit, and then kind of added.
Yeah, surface, I guess, surface level knowledge in things. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Like some people have goals to, like, I'm going to read 100 books this year or 80 books this year, and, you know, speed reading. And that's an interesting thing, because, like, if you're reading because you have a quota to reach, are you reading for understanding or more reading for the number that you get at the end? So then again, people understand things at different speeds. Perhaps it's just that I'm not the fastest one when it comes to reading. And then number three.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was just thinking that for me, it's slightly different with reading. It's not really about the quantity, but I don't think I'm really reading for joy anymore. I think I'm reading for productivity in a sense. I'm trying to sort of branch out into nonfiction reading because I think that would, you know, honestly, I think that would just make me have more ideas than I previously had.
And have more skills and something that you can then use or utilize in the future. Yeah, I mean, quite a few books I've been reading recently have been more related to earning money and self-help book and how to organize things. And yeah, I mean.
But is that an interest of yours though, Omar, reading? Would you say, or is that something that you've, you know, it's like reading, I guess. Yeah.
I think my reading has slightly changed because, like, now for my pleasure reading, I go for light novels on the internet, Chinese light novels, and I read comics, mangas, or Korean manhwa. I'm not saying that right, so that's butchered. And I usually, for some reason, have been quite interested in reincarnation genre, which is quite interesting. Like, what could I, if I did over my life, what would be different? And it's just about basically min-maxing, and yeah, it's an interesting topic.
Over reflection, I guess. Yeah, you're reflecting on, you know, what could have been or what could be, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really interesting though, because I think, but again, we know with studies like this, they're always quite general, and it really does depend on the person and their interests. I think for me, growing up, I had lots of different interests, and it kept changing every few years. And at present, I've got I'm on photography, and that was going strong from pre-U, and then now I've got this new interest on podcasting. So I think it really does change with I hold that opinion quite strongly that it's exposure that you have, and that exposure can sort of shape the interest that you have. And I think you have a similar opinion to that as well.
Yeah, it is pretty much that we just have access to a lot more. Like even for number three, fitness, uh, a lot of people either would have to hire like a personal trainer, or before you'd have to have some exposure to fitness to a degree. But on the internet, like you have so many different routines you can follow, so many different diets and stuff that you can look into. So you can actually kind of mix and match and make your own style that suits you. So I think millennials and Gen Z moving forward are all blessed with a lot of information to digest. Whereas I think with boomers, it was more of where you were born that really affects how much access you have. I mean, millennials and Gen Z still have that affecting them, but it was more of you do one thing and that would be your thing. Like you play
Yeah.
rugby, played football, or you do the popular thing, or you'd either try and branch out and do your own thing. So
Yeah, I think the heterogeneous sort of interest, I think it is quite characteristic of millennials. I think more specifically than perhaps baby boomers. But again, it could just
mm,
be a perception that I'm having, perhaps. Right. And the last
yeah,
question that I
I
have for
mean, I
you,
feel
yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to add that I feel that between millennials and boomers, especially for millennials, we were kind of brought up and raised to be like, oh, you guys are probably going to be special. Like you can do whatever you want. You can be like doctors or reach the high level. The world's your oyster. And I feel for some people, it just doesn't feel like they fulfilled that. And it's kind of frustrating. I don't know if that adds anything to this conversation right now, but yeah.
No, yeah, I think it's a point to add, I think. Yeah. Don't worry. Okay. And then the last question that I have, Omar, is why do you think it is important for millennials to have special interests? And I think especially in a time like this, we're all going through a global pandemic. We might be nearing the end, hopefully, but
Hmm.
why do you think it is important for us to have these interests?
I think it's important to have interests that are special to you because it can, it's development, it's growth. And especially in a pandemic, you have a chance to kind of think about different things because you're not caught up in your life. It's rather that your life has come to a standstill. And so it's kind of like a pause in this giant rat race, to say. And you can look into whether you really wanted to live the life you did before. And in some cases, a lot of people do, just waiting for this pandemic to be done with. And in other cases, I think it's kind of a moment for people to consider what interest they're really interested in. So it's an opportunity. And I think, especially if you're in quarantine and stuff, you can do more research or have more time for yourself and reflect. So
Yeah. And
having
what have
interest.
you, what's an interest that you sort of started during this time?
So I've been focusing really on my fitness at the moment, trying to get back into my fitness because
Yeah.
I've been rather lazy for a long time, uh, and just trying to get to the version of me that I feel that is kind of what I want to be and is true to myself. So I suppose that's my special interest. It's developing myself.
Right. Yeah, that's very impactful, I think, what you said there. Yeah, very nice. And Omar, I've got one last question, and this is well, this is something that I'm going to start from this episode onwards. I'm going to ask a question to all of my guests before we end the episode. And
Ooh,
my question, all right,
exciting.
yes, and my question to you is, Omar, what is one myth about millennials that you disagree with?
What is a myth that I don't agree with? Uh, I don't know. I'm not really good when it comes to these myths on millennials. I suppose it's millennials are lazy. I don't think millennials are lazy. I think that's more based on personality and how you grew up and what you're doing. Um, but yeah, uh, millennials being lazy is not really the truth. We're just busy in a different way. Uh, so I think that's one myth I think is, uh, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. I think there is generally that that myth that millennials can be or are lazy actually, and I think especially in the workforce that could be a sort of myth. And yeah, and I don't think it's and I agree with you. I think we are busy in other ways. We have, you know, perhaps our time is being taken by our special interests, as we spoke about. Yeah.
Because I've heard some things where it's like millennials aren't working hard enough, they're not putting their money into the things that are important, like having a house or something like that, or getting a car. And it's like, well, with inflation and everything that's happened, you really can't afford such things. I would love to buy a house or be on the road to success by the time I'm 27, but you know, I've got to pay the bills, I've got to do things, I've got to make sure I'm not missing out. So
Yeah. Yeah, you need to, yeah, we're all adulting, I guess, as millennials now, especially, you know, our group of millennials. Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Omar, for that very interesting discussion. I think it was very insightful getting your opinion as well on, you know, your opinion on special interests. And yeah, I think generally, I don't know if we came to a consensus at the end of it, but I think we've generally opened up, you know, more discussion, I guess, on millennials and their special interests. So thank you so much, Omar. It has been fantastic having
you're
you
welcome.
on the show.
It's
And
been
you
my
are, yeah. And I think you are generally, you are one of the first guests that we, you know, the first actual guest, I think, because in the previous episode, it wasn't really quite a guest. But yeah, really nice to have you on the show. And hopefully in the future, we can have you again, Omar.
Yes, it's been a pleasure, and I hope I wasn't too tangential and jumpy, but yeah, I hope I was insightful.
Thank you.